Hello everyone, AmyR here from Prairie Paper and Ink with another video for the Picket Fence Studios YouTube channel. Today we're going to make a shaker card. As always, links to everything I used will be listed and linked to in the description box below the video, so you can check that out below if you are interested, and let's get into making this card. So I'm using rather unconventional colors for this. When I was digging through my stash of bling to make this shaker card, one of my packs of bling just stood out to me, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. That's what we're gonna work with. So I grabbed some Oxide inks that went with the colors of the bling, and I grabbed some of my little pint-sized paper pouncers. I've shown this in many videos. I like using these to ink up my stamps when I want to do either like ombre looks or multiple colors, things like that. It just works, and it's a lot easier than trying to use like the edge of an ink pad, etc., because I can, especially with the little pint-sized pouncers instead of the big ones, I can get in and do, you know, multiple colors on smaller areas. So I started with abandoned coral, and I wasn't aiming for like a perfect blend. It's definitely doable with these in this way, like inking them up. You just use what I struggle with, a lighter hand. But I was fine with this, and I love, because this top color is peacock feathers. And I forgot that abandoned coral and peacock feathers together, you can see like that band of like, it makes almost like a blue shade. It's really pretty. So I was like, you know what? I'm okay with this. I'm not going to redo it. I kind of like, I like what I got going on here. So the bottom layer of this was walnut stain. So inking it up, and I had purposely centered the stamp. I'm stamping it onto an A2 panel of smooth white cardstock, and I had purposely centered this stamp like right in the middle because that's going to come in handy. So after I inked it up and stamped it, I took a piece of Neenah Desert Storm cardstock and I die cut it with the Picket Fence against the grain cover plate die, which just adds just a nice, you know, wood grain texture without adding like a ton of detail. And I put it in the exact same spot in my MISTI, and then I just inked up that stamp with just a light ink. It doesn't really matter what ink, just so I can see where it is. This is why the stamp needed to be centered in the same spot, because I'm now going to use the coordinating wafer die and die cut this from the Desert Storm cardstock. I'm not going to need the center portion. I want the outline, because this is what's going to build my shaker when I get to that. So it's all, everything is lined up. I double checked. I was like, yes. Love when like the randomness starts coming together. So I took Walnut Stain Distress ink, not Oxide ink, and a blending brush, and did just some light blending around all this cardstock. It's going to enhance that wood grain, especially. You can see it more like in the photos and stuff, because I swear my camera some days just really doesn't like me. But I blended around, and I also blended around the inside portion as well, just to give it that extra depth and dimension. And I need to use walnut stain more often. That's not one of the browns I reach for in the distress line. And I say this about any color in the distress line. You know, it's like color I don't use very often. And then every time I'll pull out some random color that I'm inspired by, and I'm like, this is such a nice color. Like, walnut stain is such a nice color. Why do I not use it more often? Anyway, after I was done that blending, of course I'm going to add splatter, which was also inspired by the shaker bling, because it's got little gold bits in it. So I was like, well, that's just meant to be. We need to add gold splatter to this. Like, I don't make the rules. I do, but you know. So I stuck the background, or the die cut perimeter, and the panel that I stamped into my splat box. And I'm just using my Gonzai Tombi Starry Colors and adding a pretty healthy dose of gold splatter to this, because why not? It's just when in Rome. So added all my splatter, and then cleaned everything off, set that aside. I pulled out a scrap of vellum and a scrap of, this is Peacock cardstock, which goes very nicely with peacock feathers ink. And I used an anti-static powder tool on it. And I'm going to stamp one of the sentiments from the stamp set onto the cardstock. Stamped it with clear embossing ink, and then coated it with some detailed gold embossing powder. And then on the vellum, I'm stamping the little clouds from this set. And I don't know what it is. I love the little clouds in this set. There's something about the style of them. They're like whimsical. And I just think they're the cutest little things ever. So I stamped those a few times. Same thing. Coated them with gold embossing powder. And then used my heat tool. Melted all the embossing powder on the cardstock and on the vellum. So after I did that, I decided to pull out my little Xyron sticker maker, which I don't use very often and I don't show very often. This has been on the market for like a bajillion years. I've had this little thing for a decade, forever. Anyway, so it's my little Xyron X. There are bigger ones on the market, but this one is like 1.5 inches wide, something like that. So that's why I kind of trimmed apart these little vellum clouds to enable them to fit. And then you just feed them through, you pull it through, and this puts adhesive on the back. However, when I started doing this, I discovered that my little cartridge was at the end of its life. There was nothing left. Thankfully, I had another cartridge of adhesive, and you just pop it in. I love it. I love it. I love this little thing. So I popped it in, fed through the individual little cloud, and yeah, it just applies adhesive like a sticker. So now that's completely coating the back of the vellum. However, because this piece with the two clouds, it was at the end of that roll, only the first cloud actually got the proper adhesive. The second one, that's where it's done for. It was kind of gunky, but I was carefully able to peel it away from the little gunky mess there. And then I'll just run that through the little Xyron, put the adhesive on the back of it. And the bonus to this is having the adhesive across it like a sticker enables you to adhere vellum kind of wherever. Because if you try to use adhesive with vellum, like liquid adhesive, etc., it shows through. So you either got to be creative with, cardstock placement or embellishments or different things like that. But with these little clouds, I didn't want to put anything in front of them or on top of them or, to hide adhesive. So by running them through with the little Xyron, I'll be able to peel off the backing and just stick them where I want, which I'll show when I start like assembling everything. So I put the adhesive first and then I die cut them. And right now they still have their little backings on. That's fine. Again, we'll revisit this when it's time to actually put the clouds in place. So after I die cut them with the coordinating wafer dies, I also trimmed down a piece of acetate to just slightly smaller than A2 sized. And then, because that's going to create our shaker window. And to adhere it to the back of the frame, I'm using some strong double-sided adhesive. You technically can use liquid adhesive, but when it comes to adhering things like acetate, I do not like liquid adhesive. I'll use it if I have to, depending on, if it's something a little finicky or I'm just impatient and don't want to deal with, adhesive in that sense. But this kind of stuff just so much better because it just adheres to the plastic pretty much permanently. So I adhered the clear acetate. So now my frame has that. And then I need to add foam tape. And I'm going to go all around the perimeter of the back of this with some like standard thickness foam tape. And because this is going to be a shaker, I make sure there's no gaps in between the foam tape. That little bit on the top there, that tiny little gap is irrelevant because I'm going to have other pieces in the way, so it won't matter. But you want to make sure there's no gaps so that, the shaker bits or whatever you're using isn't going to fall out because that would kind of suck. And then I filled in the other areas more so for stability and so that the shaker bits don't just kind of disappear, And then I took the grip mat out of my MISTI, so I've got a little bit of extra space, and I removed all the backing on this foam tape. You want to remove all the backing before you add any shaker bits, because once the shaker bits are in there and then you try to remove the backing, good luck with that. You're going to have an absolute hot mess. Because, you're moving things around, you're trying to remove the backing, and it's not going to stay stable. So remove the backing first. And then when you place the shaker bits, just make sure not to stick them, not to drop them on top of the foam, because that sucks too. So the shaker bits are the Tropical Breeze Sequin mix from Picket Fence. Yes, tropical. It came out like in one of their summer releases. And it was in my stash and I was like, I like these colors. So we're going with it. So I stuck them all in there. And then because everything was lined up with the corner, I was able to line up that background panel so that everything lined up. There was the method to all the madness. Pressed it into place, got my shaker. This step is kind of optional, but because I decided not to do a white card base, I used my scissors to trim off the background, basically, just kind of butting up right to the foam tape there, so it's not so obvious from the sides. It just kind of cleaned it up a little bit. So I trimmed that off, and then here we are with my little clouds that were run through the little Xyron machine. So you just peel the backing off and you stick them on like a little sticker. And then that way you don't really see any adhesive. When you use a Xyron type adhesive on vellum, it does make the vellum a tiny bit more transparent than it normally is, which I'm totally fine with. And it's just cute. These little clouds are adorable. So I peeled the backing off and then just stuck them, and it sticks to the acetate, it sticks to the cardstock, and I don't have to worry about hiding any like glue or anything. And then for the sentiment, one side I had some of the really sticky tape, because that's the part that was stuck to the acetate. And then the other side I put a little bit of liquid adhesive, stuck it down. And then my card base is more Desert Storm cardstock. That was why I trimmed that extra little bits of white cardstock from the background down. And I'd scored it at 5.5 inches. So this will be a top folding A2 size note card. So 4.25 by 5.5. I'd put my grip mat back in my MISTI, put the card base in there, and my stamp was still in place. So I'm going to stamp this with the same light ink. This is Latte ink from Simon Says Stamp, which softened a bit when it first stamped. It looked a little rough, but it dries back, smooths out, softens. It's great. So let that dry, and then I stamped one of the sentiments from the stamp set with Walnut stain Oxide ink, and the little clouds I stamped with the Peacock feathers Oxide ink. And then to adhere my shaker card front to the card base, I use liquid glue, because that'll give me a little bit of wiggle room, make sure I got everything lined up the way it's supposed to be. Once that was glued down and the glue was dry, this card's complete. And then I get to sit and I don't make shaker cards very often, and then every time I do, I'm reminded about how fun they are, and there's just something satisfying about shaking it. So I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me, and yeah, like I said in the intro, I'll have links to all the things in the description box below. So if you just expand the description box, the supply list, links to all the supplies, everything will be there for your convenience. I appreciate you all very much. Hopefully you leave some thumbs up, comment, subscribe if you haven't. We'd love to have you. And I'll see you all very soon in another video. Bye.